Cool. Hi, everybody who's watching live or watching the recording. Before we dive in, a couple of reminders. We have a class starting in about 3 weeks, Reclaiming Erotic Pleasure. 2 weeks? 2 weeks. Okay.
Yeah.
You're right. 2 weeks, Reclaiming Erotic Pleasure for women. You can find it online. I'll put the link in the comments here when I'm done speaking. And then we are in the middle of a 4-part series, free series for practitioners, originally intended for somatic sex educators and sexological body workers. But in our first one, which was last week, you can catch the recording, we had a pretty big mix of a few somatic sex educators, therapists, other practitioners, body-based practitioners, and people who are just curious about these modalities. And so anyone really is welcome to join those. And those are on our website as well. So check those out. What we're talking about today is certainly applicable to both practitioners and everybody else.
Everybody. More than practitioner, other than
it's
practitioner.
Important for everybody. So keep watching. With that, I'm gonna hand it over to you, Christiane.
Oh, that's so good. Yeah, seriously. I think even our four-legged companions could benefit from, knowing something about this. So as we have been on the runway for our course, Reclaiming Erotic Pleasure, but also as we've been getting more into the nitty-gritty of what exactly allows or enables, I should say, facilitates a person's presence and erotic embodiment, or just simply embodiment or embodied pleasure, all these words and terms we're wondering about and developing. It felt very important that we bring in the lens of the brakes and the gas, which has been a metaphor that has been used in relation to the autonomic nervous system forever. For a while, we taught the autonomic nervous system as if it were 2 parts only, and that it was a constant toggling and ideally reciprocity, right relationship between the gas of the sympathetic nervous system and the brakes of the parasympathetic, and that the sympathetic, was just always going and would go off the charts if it weren't for this benevolent parasympathetic that would just come in and keep us just in exactly the right, relationship or the right speed in our lives. And of course, all that's been really refined and rightly reshaped with the social engagement branch. But this metaphor of the gas and the brakes is so important when we're talking about erotic pleasure and just embodiment in general, the capacity to be in the moment, in present moment, with a nervous system that is responding to the reality of our current environment. And so I want to have us talk today, ladies, the women, about the gas and the brakes and the way we bring this practice, this awareness of the gas and the brakes, and this constant toggling, this constant reciprocity, and ideally present moment responsiveness in our nervous system. The way we bring it into our practice to allow folks to use it to their benefit. And specifically what I want to bring our attention to is this interesting thing that happens for us where we get a nervous system that hasn't been supported, that hasn't been attuned to and co-regulated with, that's had many disruptions and ruptures in its development, can get stuck in a situation of too much gas and also too much brakes. And I want to be specific there, because one of the things we talk about quite regularly is this, one of the things we attempt to do is debunk this idea that erotic pleasure and embodiment in general looks like the more the merrier and the bigger the better, and my system can do these big things and I am available to so much pleasure. And we are saying, well, hang on, that's potentially, if it's an embodied, authentic response to the present moment, that's one way of being, that's one expression. But there's also another expression that's not elevated, that's not lodged in the peak zone, that's actually more understated, and it's quieter, and it's just as important and just as nourishing as that authentic peak state. And so I would love us to talk about what it looks like when a person is lodged in their gas, and they're sympathetic in a reaction zone, and versus lodged in their brakes. And how do we work with that? What do we do? So what do you think, women?
One of the things I think when I hear you talking about the leaning into or the preference for the gas or the yes and the more, is that can be really seductive for us on the sidelines to watch a person in their embodiment in that way, or when we have friends, or maybe we ourselves are in this yes, more, yes, this, yes, 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 yes. And we think, why? I want some of that yes, because I'm sitting here going, no, scary, no. But the thing is that a yes becomes less trustable when it's always a yes. And a lot of times the overgassed person, or a person in an overgassed state, is going too fast to really know their boundaries and to really know what is generative and well, and what a way that you can come from a deeper yes. And so I just really wanted to say that first, because it can be really, like I said, seductive for us to want to get more into our yes. And for a lot of us that would be a great thing, a great lens or a frame to come from. But we really have to know the pacing and the correct pacing. And if we're never saying no, that's actually a sign that there's something to check out there.
Yeah. I really appreciate that seductive, you're pointing out that the yes is seductive for us. Yeah. Alyssa, what were you going to say?
Well, I was just you said the correct pacing. I just feel careful with language like that, because there's so not a right or wrong. It's not like for everybody we need to be going at this particular pace all the time. It's so much more nuanced than that, and specific to individual people and moments, where at one moment, I think that's enough probably, actually.
So the nervous system, the authentic response of the nervous system. That's what you're wanting to make sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I think in its health is varied. There's a range. And so I think that would be another thing, is that if you're a person that has a small range, wherever that range is, then that likely means that there's opportunity to apply more gas or apply more brakes as you are in the decision-making of your life.
Yeah. And it definitely, it goes, it might be contrary, I think, for many people to imagine that overdrive, that persistent kind of obligatory yes that originates in the nervous system and is expressed in all sorts of ways, but there never being a no, is actually the same. It's a process of it's an experience of lack of safety. And so that feels really important, because we could imagine that there's a lack of a perception of danger, but it actually comes from the same place in the nervous system. It's just expressed differently. The yes, the constant perpetual yes, and the constant perpetual no. Does that make sense? Do you want to?
I think so. I think we give examples, because otherwise it just stays here. And so
Perfect.
let's bring it down and in. And we're talking about extremes, of course, where, you know, the all the way, all the time yes, and the all the time no. And I think probably most of us fall somewhere in the middle. It's not that extreme all the time. Certainly sometimes we are, but that just feels important because I want, if you're watching, I want you to be able to sort of identify what maybe your general pattern is.
Yes.
So one way it can look, the constant yes thing, and this is less about pleasure and all of that, and more about, but it's the same mechanism. But it looks like I have clients where this will happen, where we'll be doing parts work. I love doing parts work. I love doing stuff like that. And there's just always something that comes up. It's like, oh my God, there's this part and there's this whole thing happening. And it's so incredible or so big, or wow, there's a lot happening. And then we're there for, you know, a number of minutes, maybe a little while. And then there's this whole other thing that starts happening, and it's this other like big, and I'm sort of exaggerating here, but it actually, I feel like I could exaggerate it more to actually get the real, like it's big. And it can be like I get compelled by it. It's like, oh, okay, great, there's this thing over here, and oh, there's this other thing over here, and oh God, there's this too. And then we're like, it's like I need a bigger room for all the all the people that are, all the energy
right.
And it's that seductive thing that you were talking about, Muse, where there's something like the energy, there's so much and it's so big. And what I find happens is eventually I realize, oh, we're getting pulled around by all kinds of things here. We need to actually slow down. And I'll start to help someone narrow things down. Like, hey, let's try an experiment where we stay with this one thing just for 5 minutes. So we create some kind of boundaries, we could call it, or containment, where other things might show up. They probably will, because that's the pattern, but we're going to stay here anyway. And for a limited amount of time. It's not forever, just for a few minutes.
And before you keep talking, what are you doing there with that person's nervous system? Why are you doing that?
Well, I'm bringing in some breaks to use the language that we've been using.
And why? Why does it?
The gas is so flooded. I mean, it's like a car going down the highway with the gas all the way down. Like, it can be great if you're on a straight highway, but if there's other cars around and there's big curves in the road, you're going to crash. It sort of has that feeling to it. And then to bring it in to us as human beings, we miss so much when we're getting pulled by these big experiences. We don't really get to integrate what's happening. We don't get to go deep in with any one of them. And we miss so much of the nourishment that's actually available in each of these, because there's something in all of them. But we have to really slow down and be with them for a period of time to actually get the feel for what's going on there.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing just even perhaps one layer beneath what you're describing, I'm hearing a nervous system that perceives the depth that might happen if we slow down and we go into this one part, in this particular case, this one part, or this one part here. If we go into the depth, there's a danger. There's a danger associated with going into the depth. So we're going to keep things big. We're going to keep things kind of acute. We have to be in triage. We don't have the time. It's not safe to come down. Constantly things are happening. We've got to stay up here and alert and on the move. And I'm hearing you inviting more capacity in the narrowing down, which is really, I think for some people, so confusing, that in the narrowing down and the quieting down, we actually build capacity, and we build, it's sort of like we're increasing the terrain that we're able to move about in freely and well. So that feels important to bring in that that's just as much, that depth is perceived as a danger zone for that person.
For sure. And they might not even know that, usually they don't know that that's
exactly
true, because it's so hard for them to stay there, and it's so hard for anyone else to help them stay there because the big experiences are so seductive and compelling. I had a thought that feels like a tangent but related to this, which is, can I bring it in?
Sure.
The practice that people can try, actually, where we talk about in the hands-on work that we do with clients, and in the Verdant Collective, we'll often have people try a particular stroke. I'm thinking of the waterfall stroke. That's just such a favorite of all of ours. Just to describe what it is, it's just over the vulva from sort of the perineum up and over, and how just staying with that one particular stroke and narrowing down the field so you're just with that experience can do a similar thing, where you can start to get the depths and the range. And so, like, we often think that if we stay with one thing, we're going to get bored, or it's not going to be much sensation. And if we just stay with it for a while, so much starts to happen.
Mm-hmm. And we might have to stay with it through the boredom and through the agitation.
It's probable that
So it's not just
happens when with clients, when it's okay, we're going to stay with this for 5 minutes, all kinds of objections and like, no, I'm going to miss it. No, but that thing, and then it's like, you have to sit with all of that before the deep connection come in.
Yes. That's so wonderful. Thank you, Alyssa. Mm-hmm. Muse, what do you think?
Well, it's interesting because I have a different entry point into a similar place where the depth of the feelings that's available is vulnerable and is avoided, but not in the way of what Alyssa was saying. Was there's so many people our room's not even big enough. I've got a number of clients, and have had over time, who more orient towards the frozen state of I'm okay, I can feel my body here, but as soon as a little bit of arousal comes in, I freeze. I don't know what to do. I put the brakes on, and I'm really scared to even let these sensations in. Mm-hmm. But I want them. I want them. My partner wants me to want them. I want to want them. I'm feeling broken. And so taking a person like that into the pleasure that's available in this moment by slowing down, getting mindful, dropping the attention from the mind and all the things it wants and into the body or into the sensory experience of them interacting with the world. And even the objections there are, it's easy for you to say because you can access orgasm and you can access peak states of pleasure, and I can't. So this kind of thing just feels like, ugh, what a compromise. And yet the same thing occurs when they do put their trust in my hands and we do go in for a mindful journey. And particularly when we get down to the base of the body, the genitals, and just do a holding or a cupping or just imagining this thing, mindful awareness. I've had a number of different people really start to connect with, oh, this got skipped over. Mm-hmm. I'm wanting a thing, but I'm not even, I didn't even connect. I don't know this part of my body. I don't know what it wants. It's been here all along. And yet I have just gone over it and tried to override its senses for fear that if I let it happen, it would be too much, or I wouldn't be enough, and it wouldn't be satisfying. So it comes down to the same place of beginning where the pleasure is right now, and say maybe putting on a little bit more gas, or okay, actually that was an edge, let's come back a little bit and press the brakes, and let's just stay here right now, and starting to play with the levers of the gas and the brakes from this mindful place can bring us into what's real and what's current right now, what our current limitations are, and also what the current possibilities might happen once we engage our curiosity. Mm-hmm. So it's kind of a similar place we land, but there's lots of different places that we get there.
Yeah. And what I'm hearing really is, in both cases, is the need to actually come down to what's right here in front of us, and allow ourselves to be in the present moment experience, and to acknowledge what's happening, and be in the discomfort, be in the expectation and the want and the discomfort, and to help our clients understand that if we stay there long enough, and who knows, that could be 3 seconds, it could be 3 years, we will eventually just move to the next place, because that's really how that erotic flow happens. If we put ourselves in that stream, and we're not in our motorboat, and we're also not anchored to the one spot, we're actually going to get moved along. And in both cases, you're describing a capacity to help people remember that they are in a stream, and they'll be moved along. They'll get to that. They'll get to whatever is their version of that orgasm. And they'll also, get to whatever is that beautiful experience of multiplicity and bigness and beauty that you were describing, Alyssa. But they'll get there authentically, and they'll get there with resilience. They'll be building their resilience as they go. Mm-hmm. And that feels very important.
They get there with presence. Maybe this is what you're saying. It feels a little bit different, where they can actually be contacting themselves and the experience they're having, rather than either trying to subtly or not so subtly get away from it, as you're describing, Muse, or get away from it the way I was describing, with all of this other stuff happening. They actually get to be with it as it's happening.
Right. So getting what they're longing for by going through versus, going over, catapulting. Yeah, that's wonderful.
It sounds so simple. Not so simple, not so easy.
But it is foundational. To me, that's how it feels.
Yes, isn't it? It's foundational. And it's the thing that our nervous systems, our little vulnerable nervous systems, get taught in infancy, in utero, and infancy and childhood, if we are given the opportunity to be attuned to and to co-regulate. We learn in that satisfaction cycle that the next thing arises, that there's a reach that comes from the push, that comes from the yield. We learn that our bodies naturally move and evolve. But if we haven't, which is so true for so many of us, we never learn that. And we then have to.
Do you know people that?
Yeah, I do.
Learn that?
And you can learn what you didn't learn. You can relearn it, and you can reshape it, of course, because that's
totally that about. I know, but I was just wondering if you actually know.
Absolutely, because it's not an all or nothing, and so enough attunement and enough co-regulation is what we're talking about. It doesn't the good enough parenting, the good enough caregiving. So, yeah.
I just want to highlight that in both of those examples, the way of working with it was to create some kind of experiment where things got more simple and were contained, and you're getting to try a new thing. So no matter where people fall on that spectrum, you can play with that in some way, or even if you don't know where you fall, you can set a timer for just a few minutes and start to see what happens if you, trying to think of an example. I mean, just trying to sit still for 5 minutes, you could learn a lot about what happens for you there.
Mm-hmm.
How do you get away from the sitting still?
Wait, what are your mechanisms?
Yeah.
Do you, yeah, right. Mm-hmm. That's beautiful. Well, that was what I wanted to talk about.
Okay.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. So if you have questions, you can always leave them as comments on Facebook if that is where you are watching. You can also email us info@instituteforeroticintelligence.com.
Mm-hmm.
And then check out these 2 classes. Well, one's a class, one's a course, and then we have several classes for practitioners. So check those out if you want to learn more and go deeper with all of this, because this is so the tip of the iceberg.
In a very basic and simple way.
All right.
Thanks for joining.
Your Tuesday. Bye. Whenever Tuesday.
Yeah,
You know what day it is. Okay. Bye, everybody.
Bye.